In this episode, special guest Lizzi Alstad stops by to build a top 10 shrine list with David. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another Zelda podcast. I am your host, David Geisler, and this week I am actually without my co-host, Kate Fisher. Kate Fisher is getting married, so for the next couple episodes, she is going to be not on the show. We do kind of record these in batches, and so she is out making plans for receptions, and well, actually, that stuff's probably all planned already, but she won't be in this episode or next week's episode. However, I have a very special guest with me this week. I have Lizzi Alstad. Oh my gosh, Alstad. Lizzi, which one is it?
Alstad.
Stad. Thank you so much. It's double A's or something, isn't it?
No, it's just single. It's Norwegian.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Lizzi, welcome to the show.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be here and talk about The Legend of Zelda.
Indeed. I'm very excited as well. Let's tell people real quick how it came to be. We knew that we were going to have a little block here without Kate, and I absolutely adore making this show with her, and I think you've probably listened to a few episodes now by now.
Yeah, I've basically torn into everything except for the Twilight Princess episode and the episode about Link's Awakening, because you guys inspired me to go back and play it. So I'm going back and playing it.
Yes.
So I'm saving that episode for when I finish the game.
Absolutely. Link's that I got to say that Link's Awakening, maybe this is a little behind the curtain, and maybe I shouldn't be saying this, but we're pretty open with our listeners. That Link's Awakening episode was I think Kate was still very much getting used to how 2D Zeldas are played. And so I'm wondering if maybe like in season 2, we might return to Link's Awakening and give it another go. Because we're playing Minish Cap right now. We have a Minish Cap review coming up in, I don't know, probably a month or two, a couple episodes from now. And so I know that I've heard from Kate that she has been enjoying that experience very much. Have you played the Minish Cap ever?
I think I did.
Yeah.
And it's kind of a blur with all the Game Boy games.
Really?
From when I was younger, because I just kind of tore through them, and I can't remember if I ever finished them or like maybe I just always went on to the next thing. So I know I dabbled in it, and actually I just saw the box for Minish Cap when I went to my parents' house today to get the Super Nintendo. Uh-huh. So anyway, I'm sure I have it, and I'm sure I've started it. I just have to go back and actually play it.
I have the original cartridge. I haven't even introduced you proper yet, but we're just chatting already, and I will in just a moment. Thank you so much for being here with us. Yes, the Minish Cap, I have the original cartridge and I played it. Now I've lent it to Kate and I think she's enjoying it a lot. So the Link's Awakening episode, yes, I digress. That's where it came from. She had a hard time playing that game, I think, if I may speak for her.
Funny.
But anyway, Lizzi, so this is kind of interesting. We have some mutual friends. Alex Sheehan, in fact, who is one of my co-hosts on the Technophiles podcast, he recently got married. And Leona, my girlfriend, and I, and producer of this show, were at his wedding, and you were as well.
I sure was. And I was a maid of honor.
Indeed.
So I got to give a speech.
And during said speech, you made 2 to 3 Zelda references.
I sure
did. And I turned to Leona and I said, wow, she really likes Zelda. And then he said another thing about Zelda, and I was like, what is going on where this wedding speech has Zelda references in it? I got to talk to Lizzi. And then actually I spoke to another mutual friend, Ben Johnson, and he said, oh, no, she's crazy about Zelda. She loves it. And so I reached out to you online. We've known of each other, and we've known each other for many years, but it's all been kind of through other people, I suppose,
For sure.
And so I reached out to you and you said, oh yeah, I actually used to write blog posts about shrines and blah, 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 blah. And I thought, oh, that's going to be a great topic. We should do a shrine episode. And then when it worked out that Kate wouldn't be able to be on this episode or next week's episode, I thought to myself, I said, Lizzi, stop. Can you come be on the show as someone who's written posts about the psychology behind the shrines in Breath of the Wild?
And I was honored,
to my
obviously.
to my glee, you said, tell me when, tell me where. And so actually today, we are actually in Chicago recording this episode. We don't usually record here. Usually I drive up to Milwaukee, and Kate and I record there.
Oh, more behind the scenes.
A little bit more behind the scenes. It's true. So we might sound a little different today. We're in a different room. The echoing might be just a little bit different. But Lizzi, why don't you tell me a little bit about what your experiences were like? I think you have a different job now, but in a previous job, you wrote a certain amount of blog posts about shrines, and I think you spoke a lot to, if I may, you spoke to the point of how Zelda often teaches doesn't tell. And I don't know if you heard our Hyrule Fantasy episode from 2 episodes ago, but that was one of my favorite things about the original The Legend of Zelda is like how they famously took the sword away to teach the player how to play instead of just telling the player how to play. And I feel the shrines do that very well, and it seems you do too. So I hand it to you. What was that all about?
Yes, completely. So I lucked out working with a bunch of nerds at my old job who also played Legend of Zelda and got, Switches, and we were playing Breath of the Wild. And of course, it was like really one of those first Zelda games where you could be talking to someone who is playing it and like you had no idea what they were doing, or maybe they were doing it in a different order. But, just from those conversations, we started talking about this one particular shrine. And then we found that we all solved it completely differently. And then it was even funny just looking at the different disciplines, like an engineer versus a designer and how they solved it.
Yes.
Basically the engineers, like myself, took shortcuts and just tried to get, this thing to the end of the puzzle in just like the most engineer kind of way. Just like, I don't know, I'll use stasis and hit around. I'll just like bypass all the stuff that's hard.
Right. Fair enough. And that's what's so beautiful about how these shrines work.
Totally.
And Breath of the Wild in general.
Yeah. And then just from what we were talking about, and I should say that we do product development, product design. So we obviously think about users a lot. They're at the forefront of what we do when we design for them. So as we were talking about that, we were just like, well, it's just so fascinating because then when we saw how, say, my coworker Caitlin did it. She was actually following the affordances the game designers put in there to like show how to actually. And again, you can do it either way, but they're like, well, this is how we kind of meant for you to do it. But that's cool if you want to bypass it all. So we just thought it'd actually be kind of fun to highlight on social media, especially just because we tried to do it when everyone was still talking about Breath of the Wild and just be kind of part of that conversation, maybe have like a new perspective on it. And it's not just shrines. I mean, it's just the whole Legend of Zelda universe. It's
the entire engine of Breath of the Wild. And I have to get to some listener comments here, and then we're going to start doing I haven't even truly introduced our episode because I've been excited to chat with you here. But today we're going to be making a top 10 list of some of our favorite shrines. And I do want to say real quick, it was hard for me to pick. And maybe I'll invite you back in season 2 and we can do like another top 10 because I don't think I could pick just 5.
For sure.
You know what I mean?
Yep. I felt the same way doing it.
And you picked, I got to say, you picked some good ones. And you were so responsible. You got to your list before I was able to start building mine. And I was like, oh, I should do the blah, blah, blah. Oh, Lizzie picked it already. Oh, I should really do that other blah, blah, blah. Oh, Lizzie picked it already.
Oh, I'm excited to hear which ones that you had to pass on just because I was already like, nope, my favorite.
I think that all of the shrines you picked, I'm in love with, and I had to take a slightly different strategy to my selection then, and we'll speak to that in just a moment. For now, let me speak to a little bit of, or speak about some listener feedback that we got. Is that all right?
Yeah,
we
absolutely.
Love it. One of the coolest things about this show that Kate and I don't know, perhaps you know, perhaps you don't. We kind of just started this show on a whim. We just want to talk about Zelda ourselves, and the listeners have really been reaching out a lot, and we are completely flattered and taken by that. So sometimes we like to read some stuff that people are saying to us, because at the end of the day, the most exciting thing about playing Zelda games is talking with other people about it, which is different than other video games. But that's one of the things that's special. So we actually, let's see, real quick, I might have a few things. I have a bunch of tweets that happen. I'm going to kind of go through these quickly. But Brad Howe over on Twitter, he's at Norwegian Wood. It's spelled NORWEEJUNWOOD. He just recently said, hey, listen, apostrophe ED'd. Hey, listen to this episode today and really enjoyed it. Thanks, guys. Mike Westfall, who's at Fall West Mike, he said, just when I thought I knew everything about the game, I learned quite a few things from this episode. And he was talking about the Hyrule Fantasy episode that we did 2 episodes ago. Lizzie, that was a pleasure for me to put the notes together for that episode. I want to do that for every single Zelda game that's ever been made. I'm a big kind of like development nerd. I really get excited about how games are made, not necessarily just the behind the scenes of the assets, but like, what did the programmers have to do, And
oh, absolutely.
I think there's similar things that could be spoken about in Breath of the Wild, how they built the new engine and all that kind of stuff. Let's see. Caleb Webb over on Twitter said, at Another Zelda Podcast. Oh, this was very flattering. Thank you, Caleb. He said, at Another Zelda Pod works so well for me because I feel like Raptor Paint, which is me, had a very similar experience growing up with Legend of Zelda as I did. I love his and Kate's enthusiasm over their respective experiences with Legend of Zelda. P.S. Here's an angry cat pic. Cue the Slack notification. We have a channel. We have a Twitter integration on our Slack so that whenever someone tweets us, we may see that right away. And so one day I was at work, I was editing some other show, and sure enough, Slack went bling, and this angry cat was looking at me, and that was hysterical that he kind of hacked the system there a little bit.
Oh my God, perfect.
Over on Instagram, Ben Sasso said, I like the feeling of isolation when sailing the high seas. He's speaking to our Wind Waker episode. I like the feeling of isolation when sailing the high seas, and the character designs were great, in my opinion, especially the Korax and Moblins. Overall, though, I hope they stick with the Breath of the Wild style for lighting and shading. Now, he might be speaking a little bit about how the Wind Waker HD remake, in my opinion, clearly is using a version of the lighting engine that's used in Breath of the Wild. And of course, the original lighting engine, I don't think there was even really a lighting engine in the original Breath of the Wild and GameCube.
Right.
How do you feel about the Wind Waker aesthetic?
I think it's grown on me over the years. I think it felt like such a departure. And I even though it's really not, I mean, when you look back at more of the 2D Game Boy Legend of Zeldas, it's like, it's really not that much different, but there's something almost, I don't know, startling about it in 3D. And to be honest, I'm actually the opposite of that last listener comment where I really didn't like the high seas navigation.
Fair enough.
Felt like it just and I mean, I'm probably echoing, a lot of players from the past, but anyhow, I think but when I go back and look at it, I'm like, I don't hate on it as much as I think I did when I was first playing.
Let me ask you this. Wind Waker aside, the Toon Link art style, which obviously then continued into Phantom Hourglass and even Minish Cap actually as a sprite, and it's kind of borderline the Four Swords
that's true.
Adventures game. And then, of course, we had Toon Link through, all the DS games, and I think they've kind of eased off on it now a little bit. How do you feel about that art style in general? Have you played Phantom Hourglass much on the DS?
I actually haven't played Phantom Hourglass. I don't know. I guess I am just more toward the, what started with Ocarina of Time and then into Breath of the Wild and then even Twilight Princess 2, even though it was kind of dark and gritty.
Yeah.
Like I'm much more that style than the more cartoonish, bright colors.
I agree. I think the cell shading in Wind Waker is actually done exquisitely well. I think they did some really cool things with mild physics engines in Wind Waker, but at the end of the day, it's that Twilight Princess aesthetic that I get so excited about. And I do feel Breath of the Wild kind of mixes. Obviously, the characters are kind of cel-shaded, but the environments are rendered very realistically. I mean, maybe the grass is a little chunky, but the shine on the rocks and the ripples when it rains.
That's very true.
I think that's kind of cool. Do you think that they've nailed it with this Breath of the Wild art style?
Oh my gosh.
Kind of brought the two together?
I really think they did.
Yeah.
I really do. I mean, even just from doing the research for this episode, I hadn't actually touched Breath of the Wild in probably 2 months or so. And anyway, it just brought me back. And it's just, I don't know, it just like warms my heart because I think it just, again, reminds me of Ocarina of Time. And I feel like that was like my first big Zelda game that I played. So I think I just have a soft spot in my heart for it. But it's just beautiful. It really is.
It is a gorgeous game. There might be other games that render more blades of grass and other things like that, and the sweat on a character, but I think that the art style that they chose with Breath of the Wild is perfect for the restrictions, and it creates a very beautiful experience. Speaking of Minish Cap, actually, Lee Tamber over on Facebook said, I'm playing Minish Cap right now. He might have picked up on the fact that we're kind of playing Minish Cap for our review. I'm playing Minish Cap right now, and I just got to the part where Ezlo explains what happened to him and Vadi. Now, Vadi obviously is the kind of the big bad through a lot of the handheld games. And he said, and apparently the Picori left 2 gifts, the Picori Blade and the Light Force, which I'm guessing is the Triforce. Well, Lee, I know the answer to that, but I'm not going to spoil it for anybody else until perhaps our review episode. And then last but not least, on iTunes, we got a lovely, lovely review from Serenity Cascade. And the review says, love this podcast. Listening to Kate and David discuss so many different aspects of the games is exactly what I've been wanting in a Zelda podcast. I only found this about a week ago, but I already cannot wait for more episodes. Thank you guys so much for doing this. Keep up the excellent work. Obviously, it's such a pleasure to read these comments, and it means a lot to us. So we also want to share that back out and celebrate what people are saying about the show and their thoughts about our games. So Lizzie, with that, let's get into this.
Let's do this.
Okay, we're gonna do. You've picked. We had a Google Doc running ahead of time, and you selected 5 shrines. I selected 5 shrines. Oftentimes when Kate and I do a top 10, we don't tell each other what our 5 things will be. It adds to the drama. Sometimes we accidentally pick the same thing, or I'll pick something as 3, she'll pick it as 1, and then that creates interesting conversation. And I almost thought about doing that with you and I. However, I did choose that maybe we should actually share our selections before the episode, and it was really for one reason. There are more than 120 shrines in Breath of the Wild. 120 for main game, and then there's the DLC shrines. And I tell you what, like if we're talking about the beasts, It's like, oh, the elephant. Okay, I can remember that. But hey, remember that one shrine somewhere between shrine 66 and 72?
Right.
It's like impossible.
I know, it really is.
They really can blur a little bit. So we shared this list so that we had a chance over this past week to maybe go back, find those shrines, play them, and refresh ourselves a little bit on the knowledge. So why don't we do this? How about I go first so that you get the final selection.
Oh my gosh,
as
I'm
the
honored.
guest. So we'll pick my fifth most favorite out of these 5 that I've selected. So we're ramping up to some of the penultimate or the ultimate shrines. We'll obviously be speaking about that after the break. We'll probably do shrine 2 and 1 after the break. So for now, I'm going to just jump right in. And again, like I said, oh man alive, a lot of the ones you picked, they're great examples of some of the favorite things that I have in shrines. Many of the shrines that you selected perfectly exemplify how you can play Breath of the Wild 5 different ways every second of the way.
Completely.
And it's because of the engine that was built and the rule set that was built and the tool set that was built. There's so many different ways to play these dungeons. And it's such a refresher because if I may real quick, Kate and I do not shy away from the fact saying that up to Breath of the Wild, Twilight Princess was absolutely our favorite Zelda game. My only criticism for Twilight Princess, which I've said in previous episodes, is that unfortunately for me, Twilight Princess was the most linear or the most tell don't show. Boxes of dialogue teaching you how to shoot an arrow, that kind of stuff, which is a little bit of a bummer, but ultimately the aesthetic and the graphics for Twilight win over for me. So with all that said, Breath of the Wild is such a refresher in the opposite direction as far as I'm concerned. Even when you have a goal, I'm not just talking about open world stuff. I'm talking about have a goal, do it however you like.
Completely, yep.
All right, so because you picked such wonderful examples of that, I kind of went a slightly different direction, and I was queuing off of a different conversation Kate and I had about, I think it was episode 4, we did kind of a Breath of the Wild end of games thoughts. And some of the sentiments we had were, Breath of the Wild's wonderful and brilliant, and they really did the right thing by essentially taking temples and breaking them up into all these shrines, basically taking the temples, blasting them into a million pieces and shooting them all over the land to give you a reason to go around. I get it. But maybe a couple classic temples still would have been nice.
Completely.
I
agree.
Yes, I don't think the game is lesser for not having them. Could have been kind of cool, though. So I found that when I had to select my favorite shrines, many of them were shrines that felt the most temple-like for me.
Yes. And now that, because we went back and played one another's favorites, I totally see that. And, I was trying to piece together, I'm like, I wonder if there is a theme here for what David picked. And yes, I completely see that, especially one in particular.
Some of them were for a specific dynamic. I have one that I don't want to give away in a minute. And then others are the ones that oftentimes they have a small key. At least we have to open a door, or the aesthetic, the general aesthetic isn't just a room. I'm going through and there's a meta puzzle to the whole thing. And that's what I ended up choosing. Though for the record, so many of the ones you picked I think are just wonderful examples of a different way that the shrines also shine. Yes. So here we go. My number 5, let's get to it. My number 5 is Kano. It's the Power of Electricity shrine. Now, we are obviously going to pronounce these shrines probably incorrectly. And,
right.
And also, I would just have to ask you, just because I'm excited to have you on the show, I have to ask you another question. Kate and I have spoken about this a little bit on different episodes, but how do you feel about this kind of, the original The Legend of Zeldas were very much referencing medieval kind of Eastern European, even a little bit of Lord of the Rings type stuff. And I think with every passing Zelda game over the past 15 years, perhaps since Ocarina, it has become kind of its own culture, and it starts referencing European culture and Japanese culture and other cultures, and it makes up some of its own. How do you feel about that?
I think it's great. And again, until I was older and I could kind of have that bird's eye view, so much of the game actually feels so familiar to a white person in America playing it.
Okay.
But then when you actually take a step back, you're like, oh, but wait, Nintendo's based in Japan. And wow, they were actually doing a lot that was out of their culture and bringing it into this game. And so, and of course, I know that they're a worldwide brand now, but I think having that nod to these different cultures and then grabbing even more from, Europe and having all of that, I think it's actually a really cool dynamic. And I think because it's become such a worldwide success, I actually think it's really great and really fascinating.
Absolutely. And the creators have spoken to the idea that they're kind of referencing many cultures to make it not cultureless, but to have it be its own amalgamation. I remember the first time that it really affected me was herding the sheep at the beginning of Twilight Princess, the little prayer cards or the little memory tokens that hang on the strings that happen in other Eastern cultures. I just remember hearing the sound effect of the clink, 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 clink. And I was like, that's something you don't hear.
Completely.
Certainly in America.
Yes.
It was like it was a nice moment.
For sure.
This, if we're not careful, this episode is going to be 2 hours long, so we're going to keep moving.
I know.
So Kano, it's the Power of Electricity temple, and the reason I selected this one is it is pretty linear. It's not even that large. I seriously considered not even including it, but I thought, well, it's my fifth.
Yes, exactly.
It's my fifth, and we'll go for it. But one of the things that I really enjoy is it does have a small key in it. There will be many small keys in my shrines, but they don't necessarily have to have that, whatever. But there is a bit of a small key. There's a linearity to this one, which is odd because I usually like things to be quite open. But when it comes to temples, it's fun to have these large puzzles. The reason I ended up selecting the Power of Electricity Shrine is because I think it's a really nice example, though simple, of, again, teaching, don't telling. We start this shrine off. The very first thing is you see a ball on a chain activate an electrical moment or a switch, and you see another ball on a chain not activating. You go, okay, I'm going to move that there, and immediately understand the rules of the shrine.
Exactly.
We're going to be moving metal on metal, and we're going to be making electrical conductions, I guess, connections.
You're right. And I think it's cool. It's actually I'm sure there are other references, but I feel like especially in Breath of the Wild, it's one of the first games where it's like, oh, you're a human, and you're now playing with human things that we use in the 21st century.
Yes.
And so, it's funny to me that if you get too close to one of the metal objects when they make the connection, it's like he legit gets electrocuted.
Right.
And luckily he doesn't just completely die, but, it's kind of a funny, oh, this is a human thing, and this would happen to me as a human.
Yeah, though his resistance might be almost superhuman.
Exactly.
The rule set of the physics and the rule set of fire will burn something, water will probably put out fire, and electricity will conduct through water or whatever is all pretty logical.
Yeah, exactly.
And they assume that you're going to then use that logic. It's not like, oh, I've got my 3 magic runes and the blue magic amulet summons the ghosts.
Yes,
and what's the logic?
Right.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a lot of fun. And so actually, speaking of electricity and water, the final thing that I liked about this shrine was, even though they teach you about making the electrical connections and all that, and I think this is the shrine that's just outside of the village in the desert.
Oh, yeah, the Gerudo Valley.
Gerudo Valley,
yes.
Pardon me. Yeah, absolutely.
Or Gerudo Desert. Maybe it's not valley in this game.
Gerudo Town. Yeah, you're
the Gerudo area.
Mm-hmm. It's true. So anyway, and that's also where a lot of the electricity elements are being introduced to you on a medicines outside of the shrine. But then finally, last but not least, you learn how to connect all these things, and then they force you to also then learn that electricity travels through water.
Yes.
Which is really, really cool. And
totally.
So that's why I included this one. It's just an execution of the physics. And we'll leave it at that. That was kind of a slightly more simple one, and that's why I went with it. So let's go with your fifth.
So mine is in a similar vein. So it's the Rhoda O, or the Passing of the Gates. And I almost didn't include it either, because once you know what to do, you're kind of like, oh, okay, that was kind of quick. But what I like about the shrine, so basically you walk in, you see, kind of one of those that you hit with your sword and it does something. It kind of looks like a big gem. Yes.
Which if we've played other Zelda games, you kind of know if there's a weird diamond, probably shoot it with an arrow.
Right. Touch it, it's going to do something. And so it basically rotates a large part of the room. And then you kind of think I have to then get this orb, and I use this rotation to throw it into, one of the half circle dips. Mm-hmm. And then you're like, okay, I guess I'm done. But then you're not done. You then get this, just this large rectangle that then, moves up and down to shoot you into the air. Mm-hmm. But it's, I don't know, it takes you a while to find what you're supposed to do, but you're basically it makes you stop. And what I love about Zelda games, it's the whole, okay, what am I missing?
Yeah.
Because it's clearly I need to go up into the air, but I'm not seeing anything. And it takes a while, but basically you see a cutout in the wall high up, and you see another one of those large gem things that you then have to do the sweet, you draw your arrow while you're gliding.
Oh,
and
the
then
slow motion
everything
arrow
slows down.
Indeed.
And so I don't know. It just, I think, again, it's not that it's a hard shrine, but because it makes you stop and think oh, okay, clearly I'm missing something. What am I missing?
Absolutely. Well, the first time that you rotate that big piece, it's almost, I liked this shrine because it's like a micro beast.
Yes.
Very micro. But the same way that you deal with rotating mechanics in all of the beasts.
Completely.
this one has that same mechanic. The first time you hit that diamond and the thing rotates 90 degrees, you're like, oh boy, okay, that wasn't a big change, but that was a big change. Like
yes.
3 things changed. Now that I can't get to that, but I can get to that.
Completely. And I assumed it would go 360. Like each time you hit it, it would keep going around and around. But then again, when you hit it, it's like, oh no, it's actually just going to go backwards.
Goes back
and
the
trying
other
to
way.
Figure out what you need to do.
And another thing that's fun is that you end up actually using that rotation to kind of kick one of these balls over to the switch.
Yes.
Very cool.
Yes.
I actually loved that one. In fact, I remember the first time that I got into that shrine. You know, in hindsight, it's fairly simple once you've known what to do. But yes, you're absolutely right. When you don't know exactly what you're supposed to do, some of these shrines, electricity, the one I just talked about, you're like, oh, okay, now I know what I got to do. I just make the electricity connect.
Yes.
This is still, you're like, okay, I did that, but what? Okay.
What's next?
Mm-hmm. Yes. They even kind of trick you. If you don't open the door, you can get to the ball and pull it out, but then you can't actually throw it into the switch because it's already gone the other way. Oh, it's so cool.
Totally.
I think it's a great example. All right, I'm going to go to my number 4, if you don't mind.
Yes, can't wait.
Now, I hope I'm not cheating. I did include a couple DLC shrines. I'm not sure. I think you did not. I think you used a lot of the staples, if I
because
correctly.
Girl Talk Truth, I hadn't done the Champions Ballad yet. So
fair enough.
I actually stayed up late last night to try to do some of it.
Oh my goodness.
I know. So anyway, it was really fun to like get encouraged to try that out. So, but please go ahead, talk about the shrines. I got through most of them.
I think I'm only including 2 here.
Yes.
And
I did the one, the
Path of Light one, the one I'm about to talk about,
yes.
or perhaps this other one.
Yes. I did
my number 1.
Right. So don't say it, but I did Path of Light.
Okay, Path of Light. That's what I'm about to talk about. It's an earlier shrine in the DLC. And I think I've gone on record, but it doesn't really matter, that I think that the DLC 2-pack with all of the shrines and everything added on adds a great amount of value to the game. I thought that it really continued the story in a nice way, and I think that the shrines that are in the DLC really shine. I've said that twice on this episode.
They're tough.
Well, here's the thing, because it's not end of game. You don't beat Ganon to activate this extra content at the end.
Right.
But I think you do need to have all 4 beasts conquered.
Mm-hmm.
So if you have defeated all 4 beasts, it means you're up there as far as your abilities to assess how to go through some of these puzzles, and
yes,
you've learned
that's so true.
If you're going to freeze something, if you're going to move something, you're going to magnesis something. You've done that many times, presumably almost 120 times at this point, right?
Right.
And so they do take it up a notch a little bit, and I think that's just great. So I chose this, the Itsu Korima shrine. It's an earlier one. It's called the Path of Light. It's while you're still in your one-hit orbiter or arbiter or whatever it is. Very early on, once you defeat the 4 beasts, you get this sword, but it doesn't look like a sword, and it allows you can one-hit defeat enemies. However, it takes you down to a quarter of a heart while you hold it. So you are a one-hit attack or a one hit to kill something and 1 hit to die, I suppose you could say.
Yep.
So it's kind of funny because I went back and played Path of Light about 2 nights ago. Mm-hmm. And I was like, wait, I thought this was so cool. This is so easy. But what I realized is when I went back in, I didn't need the 1-hit thing.
That's
I went in with all my hearts.
Yes, yes.
Like, well, this is really easy.
Yep. Well, I did it with my quarter heart, and it was difficult, but it was so cool. It was cool navigating.
This is what I like about it. I'll speak about it quickly here. The Path of Light Shrine. Zelda has a wonderful lighting engine. And I think they do a great job of communicating the weather and the time of day and a lot of things with the lighting. Though it is true that they're pretty liberal with the moonlight at night. So much so that sometimes when you're out in the field, you may not even notice that it's nighttime.
Right.
That's for obvious reasons, for game mechanics, so you can keep playing the game. And I think in some of the areas, like when you go into that super dark area in the north side of Hyrule, what is that? It's like a murky, oily island.
Yes, completely.
That's when they're like, all right, fine. How about actual lighting? How about we don't give you moonlight and all the light is just going to come from torches and the things you carry? Mm-hmm. It can be scary and a little frustrating, but when I got to that point, I was very excited by that. I love what would it be like? Because I don't know, perhaps you've gone camping and it's like when you have a lantern or a flashlight, that's all you get.
Oh yeah, legit.
That's
like all you have. So again, it's kind of nice to have that nod to a struggle that you as a human, if you were Link, you would be having that same problem.
So you go down into this shrine. It's pitch black with the exception of some blue glowy things on the walls.
Yep.
And there's just some lasers and there's spiky walls and there's some fire.
The usual when you're in a dark place. You just see these lasers just popping out.
It's a pretty classic challenge as far as like, okay, here's the lines you have to go under. Here's the spiky walls you shouldn't hit. Here's the fire you have to walk through. A lot of that's pretty staple, normal stuff for early Zelda games. But the fact that they really let you kind of do this thing in pitch blackness and just like, so actually the second time I played it, I equipped a fire sword and I was glowing a little bit and it helped me see.
For sure.
But when you're in there and it's one hit, oh my gosh, those spikes mean a lot. Oh yeah,
they do.
Those lasers mean a lot. Mm-hmm. And just walking through the fire that's going to time that, all of a sudden, you've been playing this game for 100 hours or whatever. Now you're at this point where you're like, oh, I'm reduced back down to 0, and this means a lot. So that was a lot of fun.
Completely.
Let's see. The lighting effects are super cool. It feels like Mission Impossible. I
oh my God, it does. It really does.
There's a little bit of that. And then also there's towards the end of this shrine, you do have to battle some pretty simple, teeny little guardians. But again, with this one hit and you don't have a shield and all that kind of stuff, it ramps it up. And I have spoken in other episodes about how I don't love... One of the things the DLC does wrong, in my opinion, is that it makes you rebattle the 4 Ganon iterations.
Yep.
The Thunder Blight, the whatever blights, the 4 blights, I guess you could say. And it makes you rebattle them, and it takes away all your health, and it takes away all your stuff. And I feel like sometimes that's kind of a cheap shortcut. It's like, come on, you could make this a little more interesting.
Yes.
And I understand that I'm at the risk of saying the cool thing about this shrine is that they take it all away from you. But I think in this one particular case, it was done right. And that's all I have to say about that.
Completely.
Cool. Your number 4. What is it?
All right. My number 4 is the Shada Na, or the Red Giveaway. I actually have no idea why it's called the Red Giveaway.
I think I know why.
Oh my gosh.
Why don't you talk about the shrine? When you hit the point, I'll tell you.
So again, it's just another one where you can probably do it quite a few different ways. I actually found a funny YouTube video where a guy did it 8 different ways, including using like an octo balloon. And I'm like, oh, smart.
Yes. Well, talk about how the shrine's laid out.
Yeah. So basically, it's kind of just like a ramped, almost spiral that you have to. And there's the wind machines. So and then there's again the orb that you have to get to the hole in the ground, essentially. Mm-hmm. So you basically get in there and you think like, okay, I'll use the wind machines and I have to like blow the orb. And of course there's like one moving platform, so you have to like time that right.
Yes.
But what's funny is that it kind of it catches the people like myself when you kind of get into the habit of like, okay, yep, I know what I need to do, just gonna go and do it. But here's the wind, here's the orb, let's go. Right, and you do it without actually knowing what the orb does when it gets into the half thing. So you think you're all set and you're like all proud, and then you're like, oh, it's not that it opens where I go, it just again starts to move a platform, and it's not the one that sends you up. You have to be standing on the platform. So again, it's like you go through all the trials and errors of making sure you get the ball to where it needs to go and the timing, but then you're like, crap, I got it, but I actually need to be standing here, and so now I have to rethink the way I do it. And again, I just like that. I almost feel like it's the designers kind of be like, yeah, we caught you, I'm sure it's not that way, but I find it funny. It's like they almost kind of, slip the rug out from under you.
Well, I agree with you. I think one of the cool things about this shrine, and I remember very much enjoying this shrine the first time I played it, is that it's a bit like the board game Mousetrap. It's like you look at it and you go, I get it.
Yep.
Here's the orb. Obviously it has to go into that little receptacle over there. I see that there's the fans. I see that there are things in the way. I'm going to set it all up. Let's do it.
Yep.
And that is challenging enough on an execution level. However, at the end, you don't realize that they do pull it out from under you, though it's not in an unfair way, because once you notice why it's not working, you can go around and throw the orb from a certain spot, and you have to. So it's one of those things where yes, there might be step 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. But you actually have to be at step 10 when you do step 1, and that's a lot of fun.
Exactly. Yes.
Now, I think the reason it's called the Red Giveaway is because there's one moment in this shrine, which is the only time that I think Breath of the Wild lies to the player.
Oh my gosh.
Yes, and usually that's super not cool. It's equal to invisible walls, in my opinion. It's like super not cool.
Literally on the edge of my seat. I don't know what you're going to say.
The Red Giveaway. There is that one square tile in the wall that you can pull out with magnesis.
Yes.
But it does not look like metal. It looks like all the rest of the cement. So just looking, you won't see it. If you turn your magnesis on, then you'll see it. It obviously glows red. It's the giveaway. Pull this weird thing out.
And then you can put the metal block on top. Yes. It's the only time, so true.
In my opinion, it's the only time in the entire game where the element is not reflected visually of what it is. You can usually see that's stone, that's metal, that's whatever, that's wood.
Completely.
And I think that's obviously the red giveaway. That's where that comes from. Because at a certain point, this mousetrap, maybe step 7, we could joke without giving too much away, because this is a cool shrine for people to figure out on their own. Step 7 requires you to execute on this special block.
Yes.
And then on top of it, you still have to figure out step 1 and 10.
Right.
But I think that's where that comes from.
Yeah.
I think that was a
you're
wonderful.
Totally right.
Pardon me. Yeah, I think that's a wonderful example. That shrine. It's a great one. And so, what are some of the ways that this other person executed on it? They would octo-balloon it and then
he
throw it with a leaf.
It while he was standing on the moving platform. He also, used stasis on it, which I mean, I don't know.
Yeah, you could golf that thing over there.
Exactly, and you just have to do it at the right amount so that it actually just kind of lobs in there. Oh my gosh, I actually can't remember because I was floored that he did it so many different ways. I have the link up, but maybe I can share it on the Facebook page.
Share it on our Facebook page. You can tweet it to us. We'll tweet it out. Sorry.
Completely.
Yes.
Yep. So yeah, it just really blew my mind because I'm like, just things I would have never thought to do. But so fun to see.
Those are the best shrines. And I know you have a few coming up that also exemplify that. And I'm very excited to talk about them. For now, I'll talk about my third shrine. Now, this one very much falls into... I remember enjoying this shrine anyway. It was not one of these kind of meta puzzles or big puzzles, which usually are my favorite shrines. Nothing makes me happier than going into a shrine and seeing a bunch of rolling stone balls and a bunch of blocks that I have to stack. I am the happiest when I see that. And you have some of those kinds of shrines coming up. Though, admittedly, my selections for this episode are a little less in that direction. So I chose the Shora Ha Shrine, which is also known as the Blue Flame Shrine. Pardon me. Definitely picked... Okay, I have to say, before I say this, the Blue Flame, anyone who plays a lot of Zelda games, or even if they don't, could deduce, okay, their fire is orange. Earlier in the game, you're introduced to the concept of this blue flame. There's a couple like blue flame almost fetch quests that you have to perform out there in the overworld. And I have to say that, when you have to bring the blue flame up to the observatory.
Yes, in the Kala region, I think.
Isn't there a blue flame for the gentleman that you meet up with?
Yes.
In the north side?
And you do quite a few different ones as well.
So I have to say I don't care for those. Because it's always like, it's like, oh, okay, cool. Light the checkpoint.
Right.
Fight the skeletons. Hit the next checkpoint. It's okay. And if you can come up with clever ways to take an arrow and shoot the blue flame a little further, you can do some clever things. But they're a little less than inspired sometimes for me. They're not bad or broken. I still had fun playing these blue flame fetch quests, I'll call them. However, the right way to do blue flame, in my opinion, is executed in this shrine.
Yes.
This is a situation. Blue flame, it basically works just like normal fire in that water will put it out. It'll eventually go out on its own. I think it lasts a little longer than normal fire.
I think it does too, yeah.
It's kind of magic. It's like magic fire. It doesn't matter. They don't really explain it, and they don't really need to. But in this shrine, you start the thing off, and there's a torch with some blue flame on it. Or at least you get to it very shortly. And quickly you realize, oh, wow, look at this gauntlet that I'm going to have to climb of hoses and stone.
It's crazy.
Moving platforms. And you start to realize, okay, I know what I'm doing here. I'm carrying this blue flame all the way up to the top. There are some checkpoints, which is fine. But the reason I enjoy this is every checkpoint involves a degree of puzzle.
Yep.
You look forward and you go, how am I going to move this flame through here? Sometimes it's as simple as crouching under a hose. Sometimes it's using magnesis. Sometimes it's using I forget the one that freezes stuff.
The stasis.
Stasis, pardon me. Thank you. You did say that earlier, yes. So occasionally you're using a mix of two. You're stasising something and then magnesising something.
Yes.
I don't know if there's too much ice blocking in this one, but...
Although I think you might be able to turn those fountains off with the ice.
Maybe.
I can't remember. But anyway.
I never quite tried with that one. Usually I feel like maybe the water has to be visible, but I think you... Oh, but actually, no, if the water's going, I don't know.
We'll never know.
We'll have to get back into this shrine.
And we're going to, I'm going to report back to everybody.
Can't do it! Zelda lied! Okay, so anyway, and then also the checkpoint nature of this, the gauntlet nature of this shrine feels a lot like a classic dungeon to me.
It really does.
Not one of these larger meta puzzles where not like a water temple in a classic dungeon, but maybe closer to like a lava temple where it really is. You're going from here to there to there, And it's so funny that I'm saying that because usually, I usually am drawn more towards the big, larger puzzles. There's a lot of layers. I don't usually like the blue flame. I'm looking at my notes here. Don't usually like the blue flame quests, but there are 2 combat moments in this game where you have to fight or in this shrine where you have to fight some guardians to get through. But if you're clever and run fast enough, you can just get to the torch. Yep. There's a really nice little trick with the second battle where there's leaves on the ground. And if you notice that helps quite a bit for reasons.
Completely.
And
then even the last thing with
yes,
in the circle. And I just love that callback to older games where, you have to do your little spin attack
Indeed. Yeah, you have the blue flame on your torch if you've made it that far. Mm-hmm. There's probably 7 torches to light, all with fountains aimed at them. If you light one, all the fountains turn on, if I remember correctly, and put the flame out. Yep. And you need to figure out what to do. And if you can think about Ocarina of Time and some of the moves you can do in that game, and actually it goes all the way back to Link's Awakening.
You're right.
There's the spin attack in Link's Awakening. I just spoiled it.
Well, now I'm just done with the game. I was like, spin
We're
attack.
Over. That's it. So anyway, that's why I picked the Blue Flame Shrine. It's a bit longer. It feels like a classic dungeon. How about your number 3? And then I think we'll go to break.
Well, and then just real quick, I'll say when I saw that you picked that one, I was like, oh man, that was a good shrine. So I feel like that would have made my list too. So just as a nod to you, you've been so complimentary in my choices. I was like, oh dang, this is a good shrine for David to pick.
It was a nice one.
So my number 3 is the Dako Chase Shrine, or the whole picture. Mm-hmm. And so this is another one that plays with electricity. So it's kind of a similar nod to your Power of Electricity one that you picked.
Well, if my Power of Electricity introduces the concept, this thing makes you use it.
Oh, yeah. And I mean, it almost, not that I am an electrical engineer by any stretch of the imagination, but it brought me back to my circuits class in college.
There's
and I'm like, oh my gosh.
I'm so sorry, pardon me. There's kind of a circuit board on the ground of this shrine.
It legit is.
You're
it really is.
making connections. Anyway.
Yes. And it was just fun. And I think there's not too much to say about it, but basically, again, you're using real physics to make these connections because you're trying to find the metal pieces in it. And when I went back to play it, I feel like the first time I played this shrine, I felt like I had to use one of my metal weapons.
I'm sure you did.
And I remember thinking like, man, that is really like drawing into like, oh shoot, I feel like I have nothing else to make these circuits. What can I do? Again, you stop and think like, shoot, I must be missing something. What do I do? And to have it be that someone has to go into their arsenal and hopefully they have a metal, tool to drop on the floor. I was just like, oh, that's so cool.
There have been some shrines I've seen where people have laid out 4 to 5 to 6 metal swords to complete a circuit in a separate shrine, and you definitely can do that in this shrine.
Completely. And so I didn't need to use it when I went back and played it. And again, maybe I am mixing it up with a different circuit shrine, or there is the treasure chest that's metal in the shrine. So maybe the first time I played it, I hadn't caught that was a metal chest.
I think that is the hint that's in the title. The whole picture, use the metal chest.
Oh my gosh, you are on these like little side names. You
on
just
the side
know
names.
it.
They're kind of little.
I think you're right.
They're often clues.
Right, which I have tried to. I always do try to use it, and I'm going to talk about it in my number 2 and number 1 shrine.
Oh yes, I see.
But then there are some names where I'm just like, man, even after I played this now, I don't know why it's called that. But
so you're
enlightening me.
This one is super cool. They present 2 metal barrels, and you say, okay, I get it. I'm going to make these connections, and they start opening up doors, which give you more metal objects to work with. And you go, okay, I get it. I'll move along. But if you're not careful halfway through, you run out of objects that you can use. And one of the brilliant things about Breath of the Wild is that, yes, like perhaps the first time you played this shrine, Lizzie, you said, well, I'll take one of my big swords and I'll lay it down. And there it is. The electricity goes through and it works. Yep. And you can technically do that in other ways. For the first time I played it, I thought, well, oh no, I'm out of metal stuff. And then I'm magnesicine looking around and the chest is glowing red. And I was like, can I use that chest?
Yes, exactly.
And I think that's what they're referencing just a little bit.
Right.
And then eventually, at the end of the day, you need to use 2 big cubes to complete the final circuit.
Yes, which is cool because you're basically sending electricity in 2 different directions, like on 2 different planes, which is
2
cool.
different planes, indeed. Yeah. And that's the trick because you cannot use a sword or a treasure chest, presumably, to make that connection. You must eventually at least get to the 2 big metal cubes.
Exactly.
And then it's easy riding after that.
And then it's just electrical engineering at that point.
Is there? It kind of is. It really kind of is. Is there a weird chest in that one? No, I guess the weird chest is the weird chest.
Is the metal one, yeah.
There isn't anything hidden really, like in your number 1 where you have to turn around and...
I don't think so. I don't think so.
All right.
It's all on the floor.
I think so. Lizzie, with that, I think we're going to go to break right now. we're going a little over time, but I think this is wonderful.
Yeah, this is great.
And we'll be back in just a few minutes.
All right, we'll see you on the flip side.
Talk about our second and first favorite shrines, maybe do a little recap. Excellent. See you in a bit. Hey everyone, David Geisler here, and I am very excited to share that we have just launched our Patreon page for Another Zelda podcast. Patreon is a great way for creators to grow their content, and we're really looking forward to using this space as a way to say thank you to our listeners. We'd love to have your support, and we've put together some rewards that we're pretty excited about. Things like additional uncut bonus content, custom wallpapers, and of course, early access to all of our episodes. So if you like, after the show, head on over to our page at patreon.com/Another Zelda Podcast. You can also find a link to the page in our show notes. Thank you very much. All right, everybody, welcome back to Another Zelda Podcast. I am here with special guest Lizzi Alstad, and we are discussing we're kind of aggregating a list of what we're kind of considering the top 10 best shrines in Breath of the Wild.
Yes, we sure are. And we were just discussing over the break, too, that David and I really have a similar gut feel about what makes a great shrine. And so I like that, because we were kind of picking similar things, we're also talking about shrines that really feel more like a temple. So it's just kind of a mishmash of all the great things about the Legend of Zelda games, of what makes the puzzles fun and challenging. And
absolutely. It's absolutely true. Yeah, I think we have a similar appreciation. And I didn't say this in the beginning of the episode, but I will say it now. I noticed, and I'm happy about this, that we are not including shrines that have a shrine quest attached to them.
We are true.
Picking shrines that internally are their own little maze or gauntlet or machine or puzzle or something like that. And perhaps someday we'll also I'm sure we're going to do a favorite shrine quest episode.
Yes.
And maybe that'd be a great excuse to have you back another time. And like I already said, maybe we'll do another top 10 in season 2. Who knows, Lizzie, but this is a lot of fun.
It's so fun.
And thank you so much for coming down to Chicago. You drove from Madison today.
I sure did.
I really appreciate it.
Yeah.
It's so much nicer sitting at a table than Skyping in or something.
Yes, it really is. It's a lot more fun.
And I drive to Milwaukee just to make it so that I can sit at a table with Kate, and it's always really nice. And then I think there was one other thing I was going to say about these shrines. No shrine quests, similar appreciation. No, we can leave it at that.
Yeah.
That's cool. Because there are some really, really cool shrine quests out there as well.
There really are.
Some that I enjoyed quite a bit. So, yes, we are kind of building a light top 10 list, which we will go over by the time we are done here. And I will start with my second, I guess, most favorite pick. And this was one that I just adored, this shrine, the first time I was in it. It is the right amount of challenge. It's the right, believe it or not, amount of frustration, the right amount of, to inform my selection process, the right amount of feeling like a traditional dungeon, which is a stipulation that I kind of added as I was picking my shrines. Mm-hmm. Because like I said, so many that you picked I also was pretty excited about. So this is the Mosa Shrine. There's an apostrophe in there. Do you think it's Musao?
Probably Mosa.
Mosa? I'm going to say Mosa. The Shea Mosa Shrine, which is the Swinging Flames Shrine. And for me, this is great because so the first time in a Zelda game that I had a quote-unquote physics moment, there certainly are a few in the 2D games, but it was the Deku Tree, underneath the Deku Tree in Ocarina of Time, when I realized that I could take a torch and burn a spider web.
Yes.
That was when David in high school, or even a little bit before high school, now that I think about it, did that act. That David right, of 20, 30 years ago, was like, I'm in on Zelda. I'm into it. I like it.
Completely.
And so anytime you have to burn stuff in Zelda, I get excited. And that actually sounds kind of funny. That is not from the pyrotechnic inclinations, but that is just the puzzle mechanics of burning things. Burning leaves, burning this or that, opening things up, unlocking things is always really cool. And the idea of having these natural-looking paths in a Zelda game of things, of leaves and stuff like that, can be exciting.
Yes.
I think a couple times in Breath of the Wild, it's more like light this. I almost said Twitch, but that is not what I'm thinking of. Light this ignite. What?
The
Lizzie?
torch?
Well, not the torch.
No.
The wick. Oh my gosh, the wick.
The wick.
Like we just had 4th of July. I couldn't think of the word for a second there. Light this wick and then watch the little fire happen. And sometimes that happens a little bit in this shrine of swinging flames. But for the most part, It doesn't. And so you start the shrine off, and yet it is pretty simple. There's leaves on the walls. There is a torch. You kind of start figuring it out. Okay, I'm going to light these leaves. It lets you through a few things. But let's see. Some of the things that I do like is, okay, I put lots of leaves in my notes here.
It's true.
Leaves everywhere, so it's not necessarily just like there's the one context-sensitive patch of leaves. Of course, I should light that.
Right.
And also the torches. As you go into this shrine, the torches aren't in necessarily normal places. Mm-hmm. The very, very first door to open, if you can use a fire arrow or a fire-based weapon, but if you don't have one of those and you're in this shrine, if you're very careful, you can look up, and actually a whole story above you, there's a torch hanging above you, and you can hit that. It'll fall down and hit the leaves if you need to be particularly observant. I think the first time I played, I just used a flame blade or something like that.
Right.
I remember when I was replaying some of these shrines, I was a little low on my arrow inventory because I've been playing. Well, I've had a lot of fun. I've been going back into the Master Quest.
Oh, right.
Recently,
right.
Back in meaning I started playing Master Quest a few months ago, and every 9th day I'll go in for a half an hour and play like another shrine or something in Master Quest. And boy, is that a pleasurable experience. Have you played Master Quest ever yet?
I haven't started it yet.
If you've gone, once you go through all the DLC for regular normal mode, I highly recommend. Or maybe take a month break or something.
Right, and then go back.
It makes the game new all over again.
Awesome.
It wasn't just like this game, but harder. It kind of is, but it is worth it.
Okay, good to know.
Because you have this new skill set, you know what I mean? Okay, fine, whatever. So you have these torches. We know that torches and lanterns will set leaves on fire. This is the first time where, I don't know, it's almost a spoiler, but I guess I'll talk about it. Certain torches are made out of metal, and if you get clever with your magnesis, there are times where if you shoot the rope of a torch, it falls and lands in an area where leaves are not.
Right.
And so you might think, oh man, I have to get to those leaves over there. Oh, those leaves are 10 feet over on the ground. Again, if you're in this shrine with fire arrows, you're just hitting leaves left and right and find the shrine's pretty easy. But if you don't have those things with you and you have to play with the mechanics inside the shrine, what you have to do, or one of the ways to execute on this, is you take magnesis on the metal torch, you pull it towards you, you let go, the torch starts swinging, then at the right time, you take an arrow and hit the rope, you actually lob the torch into the leaves. Yep. This happens more than once in this shrine, and that's just a lot of fun.
It really is.
It takes something simple like light the wick of leaves, and fortunately turns it into a little bit more of a puzzle mechanic.
Exactly.
There's definitely there's a light physics puzzle with bringing a ball down a ramp and getting it to spin a wheel.
Yep.
The first time you look at the wheel, like, what am I really doing? There isn't any real mind melters in this shrine as far as puzzles go. I know like your number one is something that if someone's not looking correctly, they may miss a lot of things, and I can't wait to speak about your number one shrine. It was a shrine that I really enjoyed. But this one is very classic dungeon feeling. There's another small key in this one. It has that kind of feel of early Zelda dungeons where you're like, okay, this room and the next room, figure it out, use the, back in the Ocarina days, use the thing to hit the eye and go to the next room. And there's a little bit of that.
Yeah, like cut the leaves to show like a door, or in Link to the Past when you cut the curtains in the sanctuary to get, it's like, it is totally kind of a nod to that of just like finding the secrets behind the leaves.
And so even though I often enjoy, as I've said many times this episode, the bigger, broader puzzles that really get meta and make you think, there's a certain amount of nostalgia to some of these that I chose to select, and I chose them for those reasons. And this one is a nice mix of feeling like a classic dungeon. There's just enough steps and checkpoints. You still get to get a small key. You still see a door you can't go through.
Yep.
And there's just enough light puzzles in there that makes it a lot of fun. So I chose that as my number two under that kind of context, under that reasoning. So your number two, let's do this.
So my number two, this is the one that I referenced earlier in the show where I was talking with my former coworkers and we were just realizing how differently we did it. So it's the Niez Yoma Shrine, or Pushing Power. Mm-hmm. So it's the shrine you walk in and it almost just feels like a circus of things that are going on, because you just see this large ramp with water flowing down the ramp, and you see different wedges within the ramp, and you see a laser, and there's balls rolling down the large ramp, and you're just like, oh my gosh, what am I supposed to do here? It's like this
massive Plinko machine.
It really is, yes,
from
the
another
Plinko
world.
Machine. It's so true. That's a really good way of thinking about it. And so, you just kind of make your way up the ramp, and you're kind of looking around, just, again, what am I doing here? And again, you see the large kind of divot in the ground, so you're like, okay, something has to get into here, and that will open. Will. Yeah, right. Yeah. Something probably will. And then you see the large, orb at the top of the ramp, but then even that is on its own pedestal, and you're like, oh my gosh, how am I going to get this down? And
If I may, you cannot magnesis it. It's made out of stone.
Right, you can't magnesis it. Yep.
It's not made out of metal.
And this was already a place where, again, my coworkers and I, we laughed because the engineers well, again, it's not like it's across any sort of discipline lines, but for my coworkers, the engineers, we used stasis on it and then like threw bombs at it to explode it to make it launch off of the landing pad.
Okay.
Turns out a more delicate approach
ice, I'm sure.
Is yes, you use the ice because again the water is running down that back wall that's then the same water that's running down the ramp. So yeah, you could just push it off.
Well, I want to speak to that for a second. I think that's an excellent example. I personally think, if I may, real quick, this shrine is a definitive shrine in the game and should be used as an example of what the good shrines are like in Breath of the Wild. I'm so happy it's your number 2. I think your number 1 also fits into this category. But I think that if you need to show someone what a shrine is like in Breath of the Wild, this is one that should be shown.
Completely.
And to talk about that water point just real quick, they do another brilliant thing with this water. It's a slanted platform with all these massive stone, intimidating, scary stone Indiana Jones boulders rolling down it. So first of all, that's scary in the first place.
Yep.
But the whole thing is covered in water. There's a waterfall that's hitting this ledge up top, and it's just coming down, and it creates a downward energy, and you're always standing in ankle-deep water, and it's intense, and it's scary, and if you were doing that in real life, it would be very, very stressful.
Yes, completely.
But what they do is they put the water everywhere so that, a bit like the leaves in the last temple I said, you can almost forget, I can use the ice thing.
Exactly.
I forget what the freeze block is called.
I'm actually blanking on it too.
Yeah, it's okay. I'm calling it the ice thing for this episode.
Thing. Yeah.
And so there's water coming down the wall, and there's water along the entire floor. And once someone realizes that, an entire new world opens up on how to solve this puzzle. And so I hand it back to you.
Yeah, it's so true. And so I knew to use the ice thing on the ramp, but yeah, I didn't see to use it to even just get the orb moving. But then even once you get the orb moving, it uses the wedges to angle down, and you have to again use the ice thing to
freeze block,
to essentially plug holes in the the ramped route that it would generally take. And then but also, so again, this is me still sharing how I did it so differently, whereas again, my friend and coworker Caitlin, she notice that in some of these blocks, they kind of have like a flared edge to them.
Indeed.
So it's like, and then when you see the orb up next to it, you see that it's a little taller than the lowest point of the cutout. So it's like, if I lift it up,
Indeed.
Its diameter is larger than the distance from the ground. Like, it's going to go up and just go down this ramp.
Yeah. So you can have it jump over some of these things if you need to.
Exactly. And so anyway, it was just so delightful talking with everybody about how differently we did things. And I mean, again, we were legit laughing about, especially for my coworker Sean and I, we laughed that we're like, we totally didn't push it off with ice. We just used stasis and just launched it and hoped that it didn't completely miss the ramp.
And that's another way to do it.
Yeah.
There's nothing wrong with it. This shrine is so great because you might recall there are the walkways that go around it because it's enormous.
Yes, it is.
And they do enable you as Link to get up high, look down at it, get back down into the danger zone, figure out what you need to do. I'm sure that there are 20 different ways to have that big, huge magic ball roll down this thing and hit. I think that the first time, so when I replayed it, I did have the big orb jump over a wall at the bottom and land into the pit that it needs to land in.
Yes.
But I recall that the first time I played it, I had it come down about halfway, and I kept trying to catch it with stasis.
I did the same thing.
And then physically push it and roll it.
Yes,
and exactly. I kept stasising and hitting it with a torch or hitting it with a little thing, and it would roll a little bit more and I'd stasis
just a little bit, yes.
And the second time I realized, I can go up over that.
Exactly.
Even though if I may, the first time I played, I did have the thing jump other parts.
I know, and then it's it gets to the end, and you're just like, well, I guess it had, but I think it's because that last geometry that it hits is again a wedge.
Yeah.
So you kind of think to yourself okay, sure, I stop it with the ice, but I guess I have to let it roll down this ramp and then stop it and make it go the rest of the way.
Precisely what I did. What I love about this shrine, again, another thing I love about this shrine is that it is also a perfect example of a challenge wherein you may not be figuring it out right away. There might be many different ways to do it. And for us to joke here and say, I stasised it at the end, and I could have just seen that it went over this thing. Well, it's fair. This shrine never lies to you. It's never unfair. The physics are never unfair. It's the best way that however you can execute on this puzzle, you can do it.
Exactly.
And I just think that's like a great example.
I know. It was just so fun to play.
It's not, when Zelda games are at their worst is when you are in a room. Sometimes the older Zelda games, you're in a room and you're like, okay, what do the designers want me to do here? And that's, I think, a problem with a lot of video games these days. Where's the context sensitive button that I have to, where's the switch that doesn't make any sense? It's going to open this gate, even though I'm walking through urban, rundown New York, but I just got to find the switch because that's what the designers want me to do instead of just living in it and using your natural senses. A shrine like this allows you to do that. And
it really does.
It is a blast.
It is.
Any final thoughts about it? Because we have some time to talk about these final 2 shrines.
No, and so again, I think why, I work in product development. So I think that's why it was also just striking chord talking with my coworkers about it, because really I don't know if they call it the same thing, but a lot of these telltale signs in the shrines, I refer to them as affordances, which are like things that you can see in actual products that basically show you how to use the product.
I think I remember you speaking to this in your blog posts.
Yeah, exactly. And so it was because of all, again, especially in the shrine, if you go back and play it again, the ramps, well, they're not a ramp, but one of the blocks that have kind of that flared edge, again, it's like that is showing you like, oh, you can actually lift it and it'll roll and travel and it won't fall down, the edge. It's like there are just parts of the shrine that tell you how to do these certain elements. Or again, there's 20 different ways you can do it, but there is kind of a way that it makes it a little easier,
I think you're absolutely right, because to speak about that final wedge, this kind of infamous final wedge, earlier in this big ramp, there are flat rectangles where the ball might stop and you learn, I could push it over this. And then there's plenty of other wedges where any of these big, huge boulders will hit and they'll start rolling left or right.
Exactly.
And if you assume, I can only do one of these things at a time, yeah, fine. That big orb finally probably hits down at the bottom. And of course, like I said, the first time I played, I tried to stasis it and stop.
Yep.
And it's a little embarrassing to say, I didn't realize I could put it up and over, but that's because I assumed this is a wedge.
Exactly.
It should go this way.
And if you do the bird's eye view, you'll see there is actually a cutout in that wedge so that it'll just immediately drop into where you need it to go if you were to lift it over. But again, you have to have that bird's eye view, and then you have to see it and think like, and again, you might see it and you still don't connect that, that means that I could lift it over. So yeah, it's kind of like what catches your eye, what doesn't.
I agree. And again, it's not like they don't lie to you about any of it. It's not like, this is the magic block that disappears if you hit a switch or something like that. If you look at these things and take the things that you've already learned in this shrine and apply them.
Exactly.
Sometimes it goes a little easier.
Right.
Awesome. Okay, I'm going to go to my number 1 shrine, and I had a similar amount of fun with this shrine as I did with the shrine that you just selected as your number 2. And I do apologize, this is also a DLC shrine, which I kind of forgot it was, but I liked it so much, and I do want to celebrate that the DLC shrines are so good.
Yes, completely.
I'd say 80% of them are phenomenal, in fact. Some of them are a little bit quicker, but a lot of them are really like, ooh, they get nice. There's a few other DLC shrines that I kind of wanted to include in this list. There's another one where you're on a platform and you're stasising and you're freeze blocking and you've got to combine all these things together. And I chose to not put too many of those on this list to keep it a little bit more fair. But I'd like to speak about the Ma'Eliya, Eliya.
Yep.
Eliya. The Ma'Eliya Shrine, which is also known as the Secret Stairway Shrine. Now, this shrine does not feel like a classic temple. It is a room with a waterfall. It's very simple, and there are some metal or stone blocks. I think they might actually be metal, and they're on a rail against a wall, and these things can only slide up and down. And so you have not played this shrine?
I haven't. But
I saw like your face like lit up as if okay. Oh
no, I don't want to ruin it. No, it's okay. I'm gonna take the red pill after this or blue pill, red pill. Sorry, I tried to make a great joke and I'm now mixing up the pills.
No, or it's the Men in Black thing or something.
Oh yeah, Men in Black thing. Yeah, we're just gonna do that thing in my eyeballs after this. It's okay. Zap. Really, I want you to excitedly talk about it. I wish that I could be there with you. Again, I tried to make it through the 4, beginning shrines last night, and I just got stuck on the last one.
Well, those 4 beginning shrines are a lot of fun. I'm glad that you were able to experience Path of Light. But I excitedly tell you that after you do those first 4 shrines, there's another 12 after that.
Yes.
Yes, it gets quite nice. Basically, you go to each of the 4 beasts, play another 3 shrines. Then, unfortunately, they make you fight the boss again. And then there's a final shrine, which is super cool. And then you fight another character, which I don't want to give away, even though if you just go on the internet, most people figure it out.
Okay.
And then after that, of course, you get the now infamous motorcycle.
Right. Yes. Okay.
Which I have, and it's fun. The only downside of the motorcycle is you're kind of like, well, I already... Where do I go? I already kind of beat everything.
Right. I've got this horse.
Yeah, I've got this cool motorcycle horse, but I don't have anywhere to go in it now except to drive around. But it's okay.
Yes.
Anyway, so this shrine, now I have to speak about it a little bit differently.
No, I don't want you to do it differently.
It has a small waterfall, and these metal blocks are up against the wall, and they are held on by a vertical rail, so they can be magnesised up and down, but you can't pull or push them. So you pretty quickly realize, and it's called the secret staircase, and the final part of this shrine is up, I don't know, let's just say in the real world, 5, 6, 7 stories up in the corner of this shrine. It's the whole shrine. So you just look at this thing and you're 100 feet away from it and you're like, okay, there's a waterfall, there's like a little ledge on the left, and you only have these 2 pieces of cement or of metal.
Right.
So you go, okay, well, there's a lot of water. I'm going to use my ice block thing. And you start ice blocking. And of course, the first thing, because you've learned this in like the second shrine of the whole game, if you put ice block underneath a piece of metal, it'll lift it up, just like you learned in the first ice block shrine.
Yes, or to open gates. Yeah.
To open a gate. So, ice blocked underneath one of these big pieces of metal. And by saying big piece of metal, it's a rectangle. It's like it's not a cube, of course, but it is a 3-dimensional. It's not a flat panel of metal. And it lifts it up a certain amount. And maybe that's halfway to the ledge on the left. And you're like, okay, well, I guess I can do that with the other one. Oh, and by the way, these 2 platforms are flush with each other, almost like bricks. Okay. That would be next to each other on a wall. But they are not bricked in that one does not rest on top of the other as if bricks on different layers in a wall. You see where I'm going with this? Yep. Okay. So they can slide up and down next to each other. So maybe you push the next one up. You're like, all right, cool. I've got 2 up, but I can't put ice blocks on top of ice blocks. Now there's a waterfall behind, so you're thinking, well, okay, I can use water blocks on the wall, but that is not an upward motion, Okay, so I can use that ice block on the wall to hold these things in place, but somehow I have to do more ice blocks. Well, you get clever enough, and you get up to this. For reason, in ways and for reasons, you get up to the middle platform, and it is revealed that you get 1 more metal square at that point once you kind of figure out how to get up there. Okay. And I will say, without spoiling it, the way that you get up is again logical and consistent, and it is akin to having a pile of blocks when you're a little kid. Those blocks follow the rules of physics, and it's your responsibility to figure out how to build a staircase. Yes. One of my favorite things about this game. Like, here's the rules, go. And it's so simple. You're just building blocks to build a staircase. So now you're 2 stories up, and you're like, well, geez, I got all the way up here. How am I going to get up to 6 and 7? This is the same stinking thing. And the waterfall cuts off halfway up, so you're like, I can't even hold these things with more ice blocks. Well, long story short, you take that. Finally, you get a 3rd tool of this metal square. And if you get clever with where you ice block things, and you get clever with how you stack these blocks, you do finally get up to the upper right, and there it is. You've built a staircase to get to the top of the shrine, and that's all it is. It's that simple. It is a single puzzle, not too dissimilar from your second pick, where it's all presented there right in front of you. Yep. It seems impossible at first, and then you start figuring out, oh, okay, well, maybe. So one of the tricks, I will give you a hint. One of the tricks is that if you were to take a normal rectangle somewhere in Breath of the Wild, metal rectangle, and you ice block underneath maybe just one side of it, obviously that metal block will raise almost like a ramp. See where I'm going with this? Yep. If that ice block is on a rail, my one hint is the entire block raises. Obviously, it does not raise up like a ramp. See where I'm going with this?
Yep, I sure do.
You got to use those. You got to use that mechanic, and you can get pretty clever and figure it out. So it's a lot of fun. Totally. It's not a total mind melter, but it was a really fun one where you're like, I made it halfway. That was hard enough. No,
right. It's very satisfying once you get to the end because you're like, I really had to think this through.
And I would recommend to everyone, do not YouTube the playthrough on this, because it's just like, once you know, it's like, well, maybe it's only 6 or 7 steps. Bloop, 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 bloop. Like once a kid knows how to build a staircase with blocks.
Yeah.
Really, how hard is it?
Exactly.
But it's figuring out how to use these blocks and how to make blocks exist where they don't and stuff like that. It's a lot of fun.
Yeah.
And so for me, that was, I think there were some other shrines that were good, but that I specifically recall that shrine, and you unlock it over by the Zoras. Actually, you have to do kind of a stupid thing to unlock it. It's one of those like fly through the rings, which is
sure.
Unfortunately kind of my least favorite way to unlock a shrine, which there is a bit of that. I think you like jump over a waterfall, and you're doing your Zora thing,
right,
and
right.
you're going down some things. But once it gets unlocked, pardon me, it's a lot of fun. And it was one of the shrines for me where the emotion of how the heck do I do this? A little bit of panic, a little bit of excitement, a little bit of frustration.
Yeah.
The first time I played it, I could not figure it out, but it had the right amount of fun to it that it gave me that full experience.
Exactly.
Sometimes there's a shrine where you know exactly what you need to do, you just do it and it's fun.
Yep.
Sometimes there's a shrine where you don't know what you need to do. Okay, whatever. Okay, I could show a bunch of different examples here. I just remembered what I was going to say when we came back in from the break.
Yeah.
We, interestingly enough, did not pick any combat shrines.
We didn't. And, I just kind of thought to myself, they're almost all the same.
They kind of are. There's a few where like, you can pull up Magnesis some pillars, or you can do ice blocks.
Exactly.
I was fine with the combat shrines, but how did you feel about them in general?
Yeah, I think generally I feel the same way. And I think, again, probably like most players early on in the game, when I got to a major test of strength, of course I tried them and then realized like, I'm going to have to come back to this.
Yes, it's true.
And of course, for any of the ones where they have the Guardian weapons, I of course loved collecting Guardian weapons.
Yes.
Especially again, early on when, you don't have as many hearts. But yeah, generally I thought they were fine.
They're fine.
Yeah.
I never ultimately looked forward to them. In fact, in early and mid game, I was like, really? Because honestly, those puzzle shrines are so much fun for me.
Yep.
And I think the combat in Breath of the Wild can be quite interesting and exciting when you're out in the world and you can use physics and you can do all these things, or you can just go up and hack and slash. I think the combat can be quite fun in the overworld. But where it shines for me are the puzzles. And so we also I noticed we didn't choose any combat ones. And we also appear to have not selected these shrines based on their rewards.
Yes, that is true. And to be honest, I think it's because I could not remember. I would have to look it up on the internet to see what we even get.
No,
in terms
maybe
of
you and I
chest.
play this game very similarly. I'm starting to deduce that. And if other people are playing it for different reasons, that's wonderful. But I think for me, I would try to get all the chests, but just for the puzzle part of it.
Yep, exactly.
There's really more like, let's see. Obviously, I can go over there somehow. Let's see if I can do it.
Right. Or even when I went back and played some of the shrines, I saw that there were still chests. And so then, of course, I'm like, well, I might as well see what's in here. But then it'll be like some forest dweller shield that's like 12, whatever. And it's like, well, I'm now far enough in the game. I'm like, I'm not going to drop my amazing Royal Guard shield that has like a score of 70
I think
for this 12,
I agree. I think that first 10% of the game, when it's super hard and every little thing you get is sacred.
Yes.
Every stick and sword is breaking because it's super weak and everything is sacred. Yes. I remember the first time getting an actual like metal sword in one of these shrines. I was like, oh my God, thank you.
I know. I'm like, oh my God, this is the Zelda games I remember.
I've been using tree branches for an hour. I'm sorry. It's the Zelda game what?
It's like these are the Zelda games that I play. Like, here's my sword. Thank you. Finally.
It's true. And once you do acquire the Master Sword and also find the Hylian shield, it does become a little bit more like a classic Zelda game in that those two items don't really break. I mean, there are ways here and there.
Right.
There's ways to lose them. I lost a Hylian shield once. My niece was playing my file once, and she got electrocuted and dropped the Hylian shield, and then like went to a totally different part. I didn't even know she dropped it. We turned the game off. I came back. But you do that whole Terrytown thing, and I bought it again. Whatever, it's no big deal.
Yeah, totally.
But boy, that Hylian shield is a fun find underneath the castle.
Oh yes, it really is. It really is.
I think we're getting off track here. And it's all my fault. So I'm going to ask you the final and perhaps definitive best shrine in The Legend of Zelda. A lot of modifiers here based on the criteria we've been using today, mostly based on puzzles and whatnot. Lizzie, what did you pick?
So I picked the Kyo-Rug Shrine or Fateful Stars.
Yep. Now this is the shrine that's right underneath the Deku tree, I believe.
Yes, I think you're right. Yeah, it's the one that I use as the warp point whenever I needed to go to the Korok Forest.
Fair enough.
But yeah, so again, this one, it's just the nod to the puzzles that just make you go, wow, again, I must be missing something. What am I missing? Mm-hmm. What is this puzzle? And it's one that I tried probably, I don't know. I was counting so many different things. So again, let me just describe the shrine. So you walk in. I mean, it's essentially just a huge single room.
Yep.
You see different blue flame, almost, like kind of torches, but you see that there's different numbers of flames.
Which I didn't see until about halfway through this shrine the first time I played.
Yep.
I finally noticed.
And then again, you see all those divots in the floor where you have to put an orb. Mm-hmm. And then you just see this little pedestal that you can go stand on, and there's like a little thing to read.
Tablet, I'd say.
Yeah, and I forget exactly what it says, but it basically says the constellations are your key.
Correct.
And something about the heavens, maybe. So then, of course, I'm looking up.
Right.
Like looking up at the ceiling. But then what you do notice when you're up on that little raised platform is that kind of far off in an area of the shrine you can't really get to, you see all these constellations on the wall. And you're just staring at it, and you're like, okay, well, clearly I need to use these. Like it says constellations are key. So what is it about these constellations? And there's 4 orbs that you have to put into the ground.
Yeah, you could say there's a mosaic of orb receptacles. There's literally a grid, almost like a bingo sheet.
Yes.
Of where you could put these 4 orbs.
Mm-hmm. And so again, it's just so funny because now that I know how to do it, it's like, it's going to sound silly to say this, but I look at it, I'm like, okay, so there's 4 orbs.
Lizzie, let me add something, pardon me, to go on this point. The one thing that's also very important to note about this shrine before we really reveal how this works is this is unlike your number 2 pick. Mm-hmm. You really don't use any special abilities in this shrine.
You really don't.
There isn't clever ice blocking or clever magnesicing. You're gonna pick up balls and put them into switches.
Yes.
And that's it. So this shrine for me goes even one layer. It's still totally fair and real and never lies. Mm-hmm. It becomes one layer bigger than even just thinking about what should I use my tool set for. So with that said.
Yes, exactly. So you're just trying to analyze what all is in here. What do I need to do? And you see these 4 orbs, and then again you see all those, receptacles on the floor. And the way I saw the pattern was there's 5, well, it's a 5x4 grid essentially, but it's separated by the pedestal. So I saw it as 2 rows of 5 and then 2 rows of 5 on the other side.
And you're speaking about the receptacles on the floor.
The receptacles. And so my brain just got so stuck on why are there 4 orbs but 5 in a row?
Oh, I love it.
And so I just was not connecting, and I'm just like, oh my gosh, okay. But again, I'm like looking at the constellations, I'm looking at the orbs, I'm like looking around, and then I see again, I notice the flames, there's 1 through 5 essentially. So these flames are lining up with the
I guess the rows.
Yeah, the rows. And so I'm like, okay, again, 1 through 5. What am I? So I'm looking at the constellations. I'm like, is it constellations that have is it the branch of the constellation? So am I looking for patterns of constellations that have 2 branches or 3 branches?
Will split or have different legs.
Right. But then I wasn't quite finding a pattern in that. And then I'm like, is it intersection points of the different branches of the constellation?
I thought it was how many big stars were in each constellation.
Yes, I did that too.
When I first got in there, I actually, you've already spoken about the constellations in the distance, which I did not actually see. I'm embarrassed to admit. So I was looking at the ground, and I did notice 4 constellations on the wall.
And see, those are what I missed for the longest time.
So this is fascinating, and this is the best thing about Breath of the Wild is that's actually the first thing I saw. I didn't see the torches till later, and I saw these, and I was like, well, maybe 1 is the closest to these constellations, and I was like, well, maybe it's the amount of big stars that are in these constellations. So I'm starting to put the balls into this grid of how many big stars I see. It's not working. I'm like, well, maybe I have it wrong. Maybe it's not 1. Maybe this is actually 5, or maybe this is something else. And then I did see the torches. I was like, oh, okay, we've got numbers.
Yes.
There's a 1, and then there's 2 torches, and 3, then 4, then 5. And then I was like, okay, they're signaling that these rows have numbers to them. Then I still was thinking, though, but what does it mean with these constellations? I don't know what it means.
Yes.
And it wasn't until later that I looked at this wall. And so I think that kind of feeds us to our next point of how this works.
Yeah. And, to be honest, I think I missed those closer constellations that you were just referencing. That, again, so these are it's a single constellation that, again, align with these 4 rows.
If it were a bingo sheet, the constellations are almost like the B, the I, the G, and the O.
Exactly.
And then we have numbers going the other way.
Exactly. And so then I noticed those, and I think what it was is it took me such a long time to realize all of these together. So then I finally saw those 4 constellations. And I'm like, oh, okay. Actually, maybe that's a red herring, those far away constellations on the wall. And maybe I just have to look at these 4.
Fascinating.
So then again, I go through my whole thing like, well, this simple constellation has 2 branches, so maybe I put the orb in 2,
Love
and
it.
then like this one maybe is 3 or 4 branches.
And one of the constellations is completely separate too, though.
Yes. So then I was like, oh gosh, and then
Zero?
No intersections, or I was like, is it 2 branches? I don't know. And
Right.
And then again, and I think why I missed those originally is because really in a lot of these shrines, those are just on the wall, these constellations. So I didn't see that they lined up with those columns essentially of the divots in the floor. And so then it I don't know what finally clicked for me, but something finally clicked that, like, again, it's still everything together. It's like you still have to look at that far wall with all the different constellations and the closer constellations, and then it finally was like, oh, what it's showing on these closer walls is like there are these 4 different types of constellations on this far away, kind of mishmash
Bigger
of different constellations. So how many of each type of constellation is on that faraway wall? And then of course it's easy. It's just counting.
It's just counting, but they are in different orientations.
Right,
and
exactly.
I think you can kind of see it by not zooming in, but I definitely used my Sheikah slate to zoom in and scroll around. And
yep. And then I even took a picture with my camera just so
Nice.
that I could more easily reference it as I was like on the ground.
Oh, I love it.
Yeah.
That's
So,
great.
like my Sheikah slate camera, not like my phone camera.
Yeah, right. Your real world camera. The Sheikah camera in the game. Yes. And so this is one of the reasons this shrine is so exciting to me, is that now we're just using sight.
Yeah.
In a lesser game, you don't really use sight at all. There are graphics in a lesser game, and there might be bushes that are growing through fences, or there's things, but there's invisible walls everywhere, and you can't really trust what you see in a lot of lesser games. And in this situation, in Breath of the Wild, what you see is what you get.
Yep.
A lot of times Mario games are like that too. If you can, Zelda games are almost always this way, where if it looks like you can get onto it, you can. Even back in the Wind Waker days and the Ocarina days,
Yep.
the whole context sensitive stepping up and jumping stuff, like it. A perfect example is Star Fox Adventures, made by Rare, which is a Zelda-like. It's nothing but invisible walls.
Oh,
So
okay.
if I may real quick, with Zelda in Ocarina, they basically programmed that movement set into Link. If he feels in any way, shape, or form, if he feels the end of a polygon, he will jump if he's going a certain speed.
Right. Yes.
What Rare did with Star Fox Adventures is they're like, okay, well, in this part of the level, we have to make a trigger in the level so that Star Fox or Fox McCloud automatically jumps. So they put the instructions into the level, whereas Nintendo put the instructions into the character. And so in Star Fox Adventures, you can see a cliff or not, and you can't trust if you're supposed to jump off it or not.
Right.
And so in this case, in this shrine, trust the walls.
Yeah.
Trust the ceiling. Trust the floor. It's
Yeah.
okay. Your clues are there.
Yeah, exactly. It's all there. It's almost like the one we were talking about where it's like the whole picture. This also would have been another good name for this shrine, of like literally use everything in the shrine.
What is the
that's
name?
all
I
you
forgot
need.
it already. It's the
Fateful
Fateful
Stars.
Fair
So
enough.
again, you go into it knowing like, okay, something, or again, I think maybe that's one of the reasons I looked to the ceiling, because I'm thinking like stars and that maybe there's something up there.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it was just, and so again, it was just one of those. I think again, the first time I played through, I think I actually left this shrine behind because I just was so stumped. I didn't know what the key was.
The only puzzle shrine I really left was the twin shrines up on Twin Peaks.
Yeah, which you kind of have to until you have the other one.
Yeah, I think you're right. And I think I ended up taking a picture, and then I kind of guessed a little and finally got it right.
Yep.
But that's the only time that I left like a puzzle shrine being like, I don't know.
Yep. But so then again,
great.
once you know it, it's so satisfying because I mean you really had to think through it, and because I really do try to resist like when I get stuck, like because even growing up, we didn't have the internet quite yet.
Yeah, you're talking about
waiting
user
for
guides.
the Nintendo Power to come with maybe a hint for something you were working on.
The first time I played through Breath of the Wild or any Zelda game, I adamantly never use, I guess like references.
Yep.
Because why?
Right.
The whole point of this game is to figure this stuff out. Even if you get stuck for a week, it's not to
Exactly.
get to the end, or maybe it is to get to the end a little bit. But for me, it's about that time that you're doing these things.
Exactly.
So it is a lot of fun. So anyway, that's great. So ultimately, we should get moving here. This has been a longer episode, but it's been an absolute pleasure, and I'm so happy that you were able to join us, Lizzie.
Yeah, same. This has been such a blast.
Last but not least, your general sentiment about can I ask you about shrines versus dungeons and how they're executed in Breath of the Wild and how they're executed in traditional games and how that makes you feel? Because we're obviously celebrating some of the best shrines today. But in general, how do you feel about how they are executed in Breath of the Wild?
I mean, I think they're executed pretty well, but I think I have a similar sentiment where I do feel a little like I do wish there were more dungeons, or more. I don't know if we really needed more beasts per se,
right.
or maybe to even get into those different areas where the beasts were, maybe there was like a dungeon that you had to get through before you got there.
4 dungeons, 4 beasts, perhaps?
Yeah, maybe something like that, because it does feel lacking, especially now that I'm playing, Link's Awakening, which, I mean, obviously a very different game from Breath of the Wild, but it's like, oh man, there's 8 dungeons in this game. Or thinking back to Link to the Past, where it's like, there's the 3 in the beginning, and then you go to like between the light and the dark world, and like, there's just so many to go through. But that all being said, I mean, Breath of the Wild is such a huge game. It's like, I almost wonder if we got what we wanted, we'd be like, oh my God, this game is so long. Which, I mean, I don't know if I could ever get pushed to the point of being like too much Zelda. But,
yeah,
it's just kind of, I wonder about that.
And so then obviously one of the reasons that you get excited about the shrines in Breath of the Wild, and perhaps this can also be exemplified in some of the dungeons of other Zelda games, but certainly I think it's 100% executed on in Breath of the Wild, is because you say you come from product design and stuff like that. The design of these shrines, I suppose the closest they ever get to telling you to do something is the tablet in our final dungeon that says stars are the key. And that's just a hint.
Exactly.
Everything else you have to figure out as you go. And it certainly seems like you get very excited about that.
I really do. Because I don't know. I think that's why all of us play Legend of Zelda. It's those puzzles that make you just stop and think. And of course, it's really fun to do all the action and the fighting and all of that. But I know that's why I always go back to play as many Zelda games as I can, because I love the problem-solving element of it.
And I can't help but think about some of the early Resident Evil games, and I certainly enjoyed Resident Evil 1 and then Resident Evil 4, and some of the puzzle-solving that happens in the mansion in the first Resident Evil, which I played more of on the GameCube remake, is a blast to figure out, but they're so arbitrary. It's a blue thing that goes into a red thing, and like this, and none of it makes sense. It is fun. But I also reference our episode 2 episodes ago, the Hyrule Fantasy, where Miyamoto said we were very nervous. This is the first time that, speaking about the original The Legend of Zelda, this is the first time where we were going to make a game that asked the player to think, what am I supposed to do next? And that's challenging, because when done wrong, the person goes, well, I don't know. I guess I'm in this open world. I guess what am I doing?
Yeah,
and
completely.
Then you get people cooking for 10 hours. Like they're not playing the game. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
But having that ability to be in the world and go where you need to go and do those kinds of things, I think is very exciting.
It really is.
Cool. Well, Lizzie, this was amazing. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me.
If people want to get in touch with you or anything, is there anything you'd like to kind of reference?
Yeah,
if they'd like to speak to you about on Twitter, I'll just let you talk. I'm so sorry.
For sure. No, it's great. Please come talk to me about Legend of Zelda or anything. I'm on Twitter and Instagram, same handle. It's at Missy Lizzi, MISSILIZZI, because 8th grade me thought it was cool to spell my name with just an I. But yeah, just come and talk to me about anything. Come for Zelda, stay for the Chrissy Teigen retweets. Fair
enough. Lizzie, you're not writing much about shrines anymore right now, like the most recently, right?
No, but we did a hashtag. Oh my gosh, I'm trying to remember, but I think it was HCD in Hyrule, or Hyrule HCD. That was our hashtag. It was Hyrule Human-Centered Design.
Okay.
So, again, I will figure that out and I'll put it on my Twitter, but you can go back and find some of the posts I did.
I tell you what, if you are ever so inclined to write future posts, may we somehow facilitate that for you?
Yeah, we can totally do that.
Maybe it's blog posts on the Zelda site, or maybe it's your own or something, but let's talk about that.
Yeah, let's talk.
That would be so cool to have like a textual, literally text presence as well.
Yes, absolutely.
And if you ever were looking for that outlet, that could be a lot of fun.
Oh my God.
And then we have you back on once in a while. Okay, now we're just having a meeting. We're not having a podcast. So let's get going.
Business.
This was a blast. Thank you so much for driving all the way down here to Chicago.
And thank you, David.
I think you're meeting up with your fiance now, right? You guys are going to go have a little Chicago time?
I'm actually meeting up with my sister-in-law.
Oh.
But my fiance is here for his bachelor party this weekend. So it's kind of funny that we're like ships passing in the night in Chicago.
I see. Well, fascinating. Wonderful, wonderful. Thank you so much, Lizzie. People can find me on Twitter at Raptor Paint if they want to talk to me about any of the shrines I picked. And if people want to communicate with the show, you can tweet us at Another Zelda Pod, find us on Instagram at Another Zelda Podcast, or go to a Facebook. Our listeners are reaching out on all of those mediums, and we absolutely adore that conversation. Also, leaving an iTunes review really, 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 really helps us with the SEO on iTunes. That is actually the dominant variable that iTunes uses when it's trying to prioritize things in searches and stuff, our reviews. And fortunately, we've been getting some very nice ones recently, which is very exciting.
So with all exciting.
With all that said, you can also go to our actual website, anotherzeldapodcast.com, and there it is.
There it is.
Lizzie, I'm sure we'll chat in the future. I hope listeners enjoyed learning a little bit about you and your thoughts on these shrines. And one final time, thank you so much.
Thank you, David. This was a ton of fun. And congrats to Kate for getting married.
Yeah, and I guess you as well. Oh my gosh, there's marriages everywhere. Marriages left and right. Fantastic. All right, well, we'll see everybody back in 2 weeks when, if all goes well, we're going to a video game expo. We have a booth at a video game expo here in Chicago. And I think, if all goes well, I don't want to guarantee this, but I'm going to be bringing the equipment with us, and I think I might be asking people out on the floor about some of their favorite Zelda games, and I think that might be our 17th episode here. And then in episode 18, Kate will be back.
So awesome. I can't wait to listen.
Oh, I look forward to recording that next weekend. Alrighty, bye everybody.